I just want to thank you all for listening and supporting the Next in Time podcast as we approach our 50th episode. A year of hard work and effort to bring you visionaries ready to make an impact on the world with what they're building. I hope we will continue to bring new visionaries and new ideas onto this podcast and see how these will make a major impact for the years to come. Once again, thank you for listening and supporting the Next in Time podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Next in Time podcast. I'm your host, ST, and today our guest is Kevin Palmieri. He is the founder and co-host of Next Level University, a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with more than 1,250 episodes and 750K listeners in over 150 countries. His mission is to be able to bring holistic self-improvement to the masses. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
ST, thank you for having me, my friend. I appreciate it. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, I am as well, because I really always wanted to bring in someone who's into, personal development, self-improvement and all that. So how's it like, doing this on a day-to-day basis?
It's very interesting because it makes me grow every single day. If you're running a self-improvement podcast and you stop growing, your listeners are going to stop growing too, and odds are they're going to stop listening to you. So yeah, it's very interesting because I get the opportunity to try to get a little bit better every day. And we were talking about this behind the scenes. It's just, I'm not that much different today than I was yesterday. Pretty much the same, but I'm a little bit better, maybe one arena, and after years and years, that starts to add up.
Yeah, I've been writing this podcast for nearly 1 year now, and I feel like I've gotten better in terms of how to ask better questions, but I still have to work my way in terms of, making things clearer to everyone and be able to get this thing growing as much as I can. But I feel, what do you think what do you think about, doing this podcast, like your podcast right there every single day? You gotta churn and grind, you gotta be able to entertain people and all that stuff put together. Like what is your typical day like for as a podcaster?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Mondays are probably the best example of my calendar is blocked from 10 in the morning until 6 in the afternoon, and Alan, my co-host, and I do 7 episodes. So we literally sit down, we come up with the titles, we come up with the topics, we come up with the stories, and then we try to hammer out all of those episodes so we don't have to do any during the rest of the week. And then like other days, I do a bunch of coaching calls, I'm on other shows. So ST, I pretty much spend the majority of my time looking into this camera, and there's usually another wonderful human being on the other side of it.
And you're basically staying animated in front of the camera.
I try. Easier said than done some days. It's hard to bring the energy because I think you have a life. When this camera shuts off, you have a life.
Right.
And you might not, money could be tight, you could be sick, there could be family stuff going on. So it can be really hard to make sure you bring the energy and you bring the value when sometimes you're just struggling to get yourself through. So I try to stay as animated as I can, but I have bad days just like everyone else.
Yeah, who doesn't? That's what makes us human.
Yeah. Well, and I want to be transparent and vulnerable with that again, at the end of the day, I have days where I don't want to get out of bed, and I have days where I hit snooze, and I'm very far from, I'm not perfect. I make more mistakes than most people.
So do you normally run this on a full-time basis, this whole infrastructure of a podcast? I think you've spoken about, like off the record, that you run a consulting firm, you run a boot camp, you run all these different activities put together.
Yeah, this is it. We have a business through the podcast, and my business partner and I are working, 10 hours a day at this pretty much Monday through Saturday. So this is more than a full-time job at this point. We have 15 people. It's a mission. Yeah, we have 15 people on the team that are a part of it with us. So it's very much our full-time passion, purpose, and reason.
Where are you currently based in?
I live in New Hampshire. New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. That's literally one of my favorite states to go visit, because That's the perfect place to have a retreat if you ever want to have a retreat.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, there's cities kind of close. Boston's like 45 minutes from where I live, but you can also get to a mountain in an hour. It's a really good spot.
You know, like all these retreats up in the mountains?
We have them in Western Mass, but it's similar. Western Massachusetts has a New Hampshire vibe, so we have them in Western Mass when we do.
Yeah, because I actually went to college in UMass Amherst. So
Nice.
That's kind of how I have that strong familiarity with the New England climate.
It's a small world, ST.
The world's getting smaller. The more people I get on my shows, like it just starts becoming familiar. Like, who do I meet and who I don't meet, and that kind of like just segues into more of like, okay, we have something in common.
Yeah, the podcast community is very small, all things considered.
Pretty sure. I thought it's exploding.
Yeah. So to your point before, yeah, there's been at least 3 million podcasts started. But I think the most recent number was there's only 275,000 that have produced an episode in the last 90 days. It's not that many.
Okay. Well, that's like 1 in 10 or something.
Yeah. And if you think about it, there's 30, last time I checked. Good.
1 in 10 or 1 in 100. I'm so, it's just, I can't think in math.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good. But there's 33 million YouTube channels. So think of that.
Yeah.
It's a lot more YouTube channels than there are podcasts. So I don't know. I think a lot of people think it's saturated, but the cream rises to the top if you do it long enough.
Yeah, that's fact. I mean, if you ever noticed the Joe Rogan podcast and even the Tim Ferriss podcast, they've been going for like 15 years now.
Yeah.
10, 15 years now. That's the reason why they're still at the top, is just because they keep producing every single week. And it's all about that grind, right?
Yeah, it's consistency, right? But to the point of, that's why it's so important to make sure you're actually doing something you enjoy. Because if you don't enjoy it, you don't have fun doing it, you're not going to be able to do it for 15 years. You're going to get miserable of it pretty quick.
Yeah, that's fact. But let's get to know more about Kevin. I believe I read about your bio where you've said that you had a very interesting, period in your 20s where you had it all.
Yeah.
You want to talk more about that?
Yeah, of course. So when I was 25 ST, I had a high-paying job. My girlfriend was a model. I had a sports car. I had just won a bodybuilding show, so I was quite literally in the best shape of my life. I had all the trappings of success, but I was very miserable. I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't confident. I was afraid of my own shadow. I was not an abundant human being. And my girlfriend ended up leaving me because I wasn't a great partner, because it was very hard to pour from an empty cup. And she should have left. That's exactly what she should have done. When she left, I said, you know what? This is it, ST. I just need to make more money. If I make more money, all these other problems are going to go away. I'm going to feel great. We're going to be fine. So I traveled for the next 10 months living in hotels because most of our contracts for my job were on the road. And I ended up...
What did you do for a job?
Yeah, I worked in an industry called weatherization. So we would go into schools primarily, and our job was to make them more energy efficient. That's what we did.
Right.
So we'd work on...
You were more like one of those people who configure new devices or something like that.
No, we retrofitted buildings. So like...
Okay, retrofit buildings. That's what it is.
Yeah, we'd work in the attics. We'd do like windows. We'd do doors. Our thing was we were trying to keep good energy in, bad energy out. That was our thing.
All right. So you've been traveling back left and right and trying to get...
Yeah, most of our contracts were out of state. So I lived in Massachusetts at the time. Most of our contracts were in New Jersey, which was like, depending on where in New Jersey, 6 to 8 hour drive for me.
Right.
And every Sunday I'd get in the van, I'd drive to New Jersey, and then I was just stuck there for the entire week. Friday night I drive home, rinse and repeat. But I ended up making $100,000 at 26, no college degree. And I remember thinking that I should have felt super happy. I should have felt super successful. I should have felt many different things, but I didn't feel any of those things. Started a podcast after that because I realized for most of my life I'd lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. I fell in love with podcasting as I fell out of love with my job. And as you know, in the beginning, it's very hard to grow a show. It's very hard to make money with a show. So I'm still going to this job that I hate every day. I don't want to do it anymore. I want to be a podcaster. And shortly thereafter, I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed contemplating suicide because I was so miserable. I just felt stuck, trapped, all those things. Ended up leaving my job 3 or 4 months later. And then that was 2018. And I left my job and started this full time.
So you started this podcast, and so what were you really So what was that moment for you when you were really thinking about contemplating suicide?
The best way to explain it is I just felt, I was depressed. I was anxious. I felt stuck. I felt like here I am in my mid-20s and I've just achieved the most quote-unquote success ever that I've ever had. But now I don't want to do this anymore and I don't want to go, where am I going to go? I'm going to go start from scratch making $15 an hour again? Like, what are my friends going to think? What's my family going to think?
It's like that scene in American Beauty where, where the main character Lester,
I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
Okay. Don't want to spoil it too much, but it's that scene where Lester just lives a very lonely existence. He has a wife and a daughter, but because he's been living that mundane life for like a long time, that he decides to quit his job and go become just work in retail. That causes a rift with his wife and his daughter. It's a very interesting movie. You might have to check it out.
I will. ST's recommendation, American Beauty. That is it, right? Like my life was from the outside looking in, it looked very great, but I was just so miserable traveling and staying up all night and living in hotels, and I didn't feel like there was any other way. I just felt hopeless. I didn't know what else to do. I felt defeated.
What was that? So now you moved on into so was there like a catalyst moment where you said, I just want to get this podcast started?
So at that point, the podcast was already going. I really wanted to get it growing at that point. So it wasn't as much that I wanted to focus on the podcast. It was more the fact that I knew I couldn't do what I was doing anymore. And I loved the podcast. I knew if I could work on a podcast every day, I'd be like a really fulfilled human. That was all I needed in the beginning. That was just that was the hint of, hey, let's try this podcast thing more full time and then see what happens. And that was, in 2018, I started doing this full time where I would wake up, I'd post on social media, we'd figure out who we're going to have on the show. And then it became like a full-time career at that point.
So that was your main source of income?
Lack thereof in the beginning. Yeah, there was very little income coming for the first couple of years because we weren't a big show. We didn't have that many listeners and we didn't have any way to make money. So yeah, we didn't make any money for the first year and a half or 2 years.
And then when fast forward to 2023, you're practically just growing it into a decent sized media company, right?
Yeah. Last year we did 365 episodes. At the high point, I think we had 75 to 80 clients. So yeah, it's a growing business. We grew 100% from 2021 to 2022. So yeah, we've multiplied.
I think was it because of the pandemic that gave a lot of people a desire to be able to take part in this?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I also think we hit a really good, I don't want to say exponential growth curve because it's not exponential fully yet, but we hit a really good growth curve in 2022 because I think at that point we were in the 800 episode range. So things just started to happen. I think the pandemic obviously played a role because people were at home and people were listening and tuning in more maybe, but we've had more listens this year than last year for sure.
Right. And so what was let's fast forward to a couple of important questions in terms of how you managed to really help people with your, especially with your venture. Just some questions I want to ask was, can you really succeed without any struggle?
This is interesting. I believe that the level of struggle is directly connected to the level of success you want to achieve. So if we only wanted to have a somewhat successful podcast, it wouldn't be that hard. We could just stop right now and things would just keep growing at somewhat of a rate and we wouldn't have to suffer. We wouldn't have to struggle anymore. But if you're really trying to grow something that's going to shift the world or it's going to have impact in an industry, you're going to have to struggle. It just is the law of nature. The amount of impact you're trying to have is usually directly connected to a specific level of resistance. So no, in my opinion, you cannot succeed to a very high level without some sort of struggle, suffer, sacrifice. I don't think it exists.
What is the biggest thing you've learned from recording over 1,000 episodes?
I would say and we kind of spoke on this a little bit, but from day to day, progress it's just invisible. You can't can't see it, right? You probably did an interview yesterday. You're doing an interview today. Nothing's different. You go to the gym today. You go to the gym tomorrow. Nothing's different. But when you look back year over year, then usually the progress is impossible to miss. I look back at our first 100 episodes and that seems like forever ago, right? And we've grown a lot, but I didn't feel like I grew any from 100 to 101. It didn't seem like there was any difference there.
Like, do you think probably because, do you find Tony Robbins as like a role model? Like,
to a degree. I mean, I've definitely learned from him and I look up to him in some regards, yeah.
Okay, so because I see what you're building right here is somewhat similar to how Tony Robbins gets his ventures out there. Like, he has his own thing. It's always about self-improvement and self-improvement, personal development, growth. There's so many of those. There's so many people out there. There's so many coaches out there that profess the same thing about personal development, personal growth, success, and all that stuff. How are you really being different from those guys out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're focused on everything. We're focused on health, wealth, and love. Nothing against anybody else in the industry, but many of the people in the industry have been divorced. They are potentially out of shape and not necessarily into fitness. And not everybody in the self-improvement industry came from the self-improvement industry. There's a lot of people who have successful businesses that jump into self-improvement. So for us, we're trying to be as holistic as humanly possible. And the other interesting thing, ST, just for me specifically, a lot of people in the self-improvement industry have never not believed in themselves. But they try to teach other people how to believe in themselves. I doubted myself every single day for most of my life. So I think I also have a unique perspective when it comes to actually helping somebody build belief when they don't have it.
And why is it that it's necessary to have that belief?
Because I don't know who said the quote, but whether you believe it is true or you believe it is not, you're right. There's a lot of people out there who have really, really, really good ideas and they have some stuff that could really impact the world and they have a mission and they have a message, but they don't believe it's possible. They don't believe that they matter. They don't believe that it'll be worth it. And if you do not believe something, you're most likely not going to start, because why would you? It would be illogical for you to start climbing some sort of mountain if you didn't believe you could make it to the top. It would be reckless, honestly. So yeah, it's really everything. It's the catalyst to possibility for most of us.
And so do you feel like you're inspiring people with your own story? Like why? Because your story is like everybody else's story out there. Like, I'm just so sick of my day job. I want to do something different. I want to find a purpose in my life.
Yeah, that's my goal. I one of the reasons I try to be as vulnerable and authentic. I try to be authentic. That's why, because I would like somebody to hear that and say, wow, I resonate with that and Kev did it, so maybe I can do it too. I didn't go to college. I don't have a great education. I wasn't really good in school. I'm not blessed with, superhuman things. I wanted to do something different and I took a chance, and here we are however many years later and things are going pretty well.
And why would they believe that you are the person for that? People out there, they're putting their money onto your putting their they're putting their hard savings or whatever they need to be able to go to your boot camps, to be taught, because there's so much so much content out there, so many people out there, they profess motivation, growth, and all that stuff. Why would they want to put money in your company to be able to, or yourself, and to be, in order to really achieve that fulfillment?
One, because we are actually fulfilled and we can help people find that for themselves. I think the other part of it is we have been in front of the camera on the microphones every day for however many years. So I think our audience really understands us at this level. Like, we don't have fans, we have family. That's something we say in every episode. We're very blessed to have a really, really strong community of people who know that we lead by example. So that, if you want somebody who leads by example more than just talking, we like to believe that that's what kind of sets us apart based on the track record of what we've done.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, what you've said is so kind of similar to every other personal development coach out there who just says, we're trying to build a community of people. We are being authentic. We love to we want to really profess our love for you. We want to help you grow. We want to do all that stuff for you. But there's just so many of them. That's the thing. Like, there is a stat that the personal development industry is becoming more saturated.
For sure. But everything is. Website development's becoming more saturated. The internet has made a lot of things very, very, very possible. But again, I think, like I said earlier, I think the cream always rises to the top. There's a lot of podcasts. Why would somebody tune into ours? they'll find it and hopefully they'll resonate with it, and something we say will land, and then they'll say, you know what, this is valuable. I'm going to come back tomorrow. I think at the end of the day, you can't not try because there's other people doing what you're doing, because if that's the mindset, you'll probably not be doing much for long.
Eventually, you'll be the one. Eventually, if Tony Robbins were to be like, were to take retirement, I think you'd be the one. You'll be next in line, in fact.
Hopefully. I don't know. I don't know if he's ever going to retire. He clearly knows what he's doing, but
yeah, again, just basically have those big events, the big retreats, the big personal development side of things. I mean, he's been doing that since he was 17.
Yeah, it's been a long time. He's been in the game for a long time. But at the end of the day, it's just the person who adds value will be rewarded in the long run with attention and with opportunity, and we're just trying to add value as much as we can.
Right. And do you feel like, is it because you have strong personal support that you're able to pursue this on a regular basis?
I'm very blessed because I have a ton of support from my wife. My wife has been with me long before this was a thing, so I'm very grateful to have that. My business partner is wonderful. The team is wonderful, and we're very consistent human beings. So I think that's a huge thing too, is, I track the same 27 habits every single day, and I'm doing things every day to help this grow. So yeah, I have a lot of support from my friends, from my family, from the team, and I also try to be a consistent human being to keep momentum going.
And so why is consistency so important?
The simplest form is you really can't win without it. It's one of those things where I think we live now in a viral society where people talk about, make $1 million today and go viral on your first video. And in reality, none of that is real, because if it was, those people wouldn't know how to teach you anything. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, my analogy, ST, is always this. If I decided today that I wanted to be able to do the splits by this time next year, I better do them every day. If I don't do it consistently, the odds of me being able to do the splits they go lower and lower and lower. So if I practice every day, I'll probably be able to do them in 6 months. If I only practice it once a week, I may not be able to do it in a year at all because I wasn't consistent enough.
And so do you think when you started your first episode of your podcast versus the episode that let's say your recent episode, do you feel like there's a major difference between during when you started versus where you're at right now?
Yeah, in the beginning, I had no idea what I was talking about, and now I kind of know what I'm talking. No, yeah, there's definitely a big difference. I think in the beginning, I thought I had to know it all, and now I understand that I'm never gonna know it all, and it's not my job to know it all. It's my job to try to take something potentially complex and make it simple so somebody can understand. And sometimes not knowing something is actually the value for the episode. So yeah, I think my ego has shifted a lot since the beginning to now.
Yeah, because for my podcast, I just try to be not the smartest guy in the room. I let people like you and other guests out there have their own conversations. Like I basically just have them speak their heart out so that I can just be the one learning the new stuff, learning all these things while at the same time the audience is learning at the same time.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. You got to ask the questions that you would want to hear the answers to. That's usually a good way to do it.
Very cool. And so one other question I want to ask is, how does someone really find their purpose?
It's a great question. I think a lot of us, when we think about our purpose, we think, okay, what should I be doing in the future? When in reality, most of our purpose comes from our past. So think of it this way. Your traumas, your triggers, your pains, they come from your past. Your purpose is usually attached to those. So if there's somebody out there who, just as an example, they grew up in a household that was filled with abuse, one of their pains is probably being abused. One of their purposes might be to stop abuse happening to other people. So I think we tend to look into the future and say, wow, what do I want to do with my life? If we looked into the past, we would see these patterns. And here's the interesting thing, at least from what I've seen. For most people, they have an idea of what their purpose could be. They don't know what the vehicle is. There's a big difference between saying, I would find a ton of fulfillment if I could clean up all the beaches of the world, and then the vehicle of how would I ever make money doing that. I think a lot of people have a decent idea of what their purpose is. They just get confused when it comes to some sort of sustainable vehicle.
Makes sense. And so I think we're going to wrap this episode up by asking this one final question, which is, what is the most powerful piece of advice you would give to an early entrepreneur?
I would say be wildly certain about what your biggest strength is, and be even more wildly certain about what your biggest weakness is, because you can create a lot of momentum with your strengths and you can create a lot of mistakes mistakes with your weaknesses. So the earlier you know, the better you can delegate, the more you can learn, the better you can direct. So yeah, that would be the advice I would give.
Okay, sounds good, Kevin. Thank you so much for coming on the Next in Time podcast, and wishing you the best of luck with your ventures.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.